Hello, everyone. We're going to be starting chapter 7 today, and chapter 7 is the longest chapter, both page-wise and plot point-wise. This is where the climax happens. So I'm going to actually divide this into two parts. This is part 1, so fasten your seatbelts. Should be a pretty interesting ride. Seems appropriate given the context. So things have changed at Gatsby's house. No more parties. He's had an entire turnover of his staff. He understands that with Daisy coming over the way she is and the combination of the rumors that were going on about him, that he needed to get a staff that he could trust. And that happens to be a bunch of criminals from Wolfsheim's gang. Kind of ironic, don't you think? He's surrounded by criminals he can trust. And further, the whole purpose of the parties that he was having was so that he would have potentially an opportunity to meet back up with Daisy. Well, that mission has been accomplished, and so there's no need for the parties. Had she liked the parties, I'm certain that he would have continued having them, but she doesn't like them, so they don't happen anymore. And here's the weather again. It is so hot. We're moving through summer, and I want you to understand that it's not just a character issue. This is in real life. When people are hot and uncomfortable, they are not nearly as clear-headed about things. They get agitated more easily, and that agitation can certainly lead to confrontation, which is what we're being set up for in chapter 7. So it's Gatsby actually who invites Nick over to Daisy's house for lunch, and then Daisy gives a follow-up call to confirm this. And Nick is very uncomfortable about this. He concludes that after realizing that Daisy is relieved that he's coming, that something is up. And yet I couldn't believe that they would choose this occasion for a scene. He anticipates that Daisy and Gatsby are going to reveal to Tom their affair and that they want witnesses for it and so forth. So he knows something's brewing. Nick's arrival into the Buchanan household parallels the scene that occurred in chapter 1, where he walks in. The quote from chapter 7 is, "The room, shadowed well with awnings, was dark and cool. Daisy and Jordan lay upon an enormous couch like silver idols, weighing down their own dresses, white dresses, against the singing breeze of the fans. But the tone is totally different now. This is not the fresh, exciting, and enchanting experience from before, where everything was light and airy and the women looked as if they had just been floating about the room. Now the air is heavy, it's stifling, and there is no trace of innocence in it at all." Tom is missing from the party because he's on the phone talking with someone about the car. Daisy doesn't even believe that the conversation is legitimate, that Tom might even be putting on a show. But Nick recognizes that there's some legitimacy to this. And of course, those of us who read chapter 2 know that Tom is probably talking to George Wilson. George Wilson indicated that he was interested in the car. And of course, Tom knew that he was just putting him off. We don't even know if there really even is a car, because he just wanted an excuse, a facade, to go and visit Myrtle. So that's two dupes for George Wilson. Number one, the fact that Tom is having an affair with this man's wife, and number two, that he has enticed him with a resource that would be very, very helpful to him that probably doesn't exist, and even if it does, Tom has no sense of responsibility to own up to it and follow through with it. And, you know, he hangs up with George Wilson and is appalled at his audacity to even call during lunch. And so there's a power trip there as well from Tom. Tom enters the room only long enough to be put off by the fact that Gatsby is there. Again, that tension that was built in chapter 6 is continuing on. But note the power dynamic that has shifted at this point, because it is Daisy who interrupts him and gives him an errand to go make everybody drinks. So as soon as he has entered the scene, he has exited the scene. And Daisy, ever emboldened by her new lover, then kisses Gatsby in front of Jordan and Nick. So obviously she feels like she's got a safe space with the two of them. And the scene is just going bananas, but it is soon grounded by the fact that Daisy and Tom's daughter, Pammy, who is just a toddler, walks into the room. This is a major reality check for Gatsby, who of course knew that this little girl existed on paper, but probably when he was fantasizing, when he was dreaming about his life with Daisy, he didn't probably factor this little girl into the equation. And that dream is precisely the word that then Daisy uses to describe her daughter. She hugs her and says, "You dream, you absolute little dream." And the reality checks continue. Just as Daisy is trying to show off her daughter to Gatsby, she's facing Gatsby together, the daughter asks, "Where is Daddy?" So the conversation where all the attention was on Gatsby has now shifted immediately back to Tom, even though he's not even in the room. So Daisy tries to mitigate Tom's involvement, in the creation of this child by saying, "She doesn't look like her father. She looks like me." Just as the child is then leaving after her little show there, Tom returns. I want you to notice the combination of tension, heat, and a little pre-lunch drinking. Seems like a great idea, right? Disaster is on the horizon. Gatsby is pushing the envelope a little bit too. Whether Tom realizes it or not, he points out the proximity of his own home to the Buchanans across the bay. And then Daisy is whining about how are they going to entertain themselves today and how are we going to entertain ourselves for the next 30 years. And Jordan, again, with a seemingly just trying to placate Daisy with her comment, is really bringing up a major theme that Fitzgerald has been carrying throughout the entire novel, and that is this notion of the seasons and the cycles of the seasons. Because Jordan says, "Don't be morbid, life starts all over again when it gets crisp in the fall." This is a reflection too on these new beginnings, and that's precisely what Fitzgerald has done with the plot here. Now, then they continue to talk about how hot it is, and then I'm going to read to you where the conversation really gets important. Her voice struggled on through the heat, beating against it, molding its senselessness into forms. "I've heard of making a garage out of a stable," Tom was saying to Gatsby, "but I'm the first man who ever made a stable out of a garage." "Who wants to go to town?" demanded Daisy insistently. Gatsby's eyes floated toward her. "Oh," she cried, "you look so cool." Their eyes met, and they stared together at each other alone in space. With an effort, she glanced down at the table. "You always look so cool," she repeated. She had told him she loved him, and Tom Buchanan saw. He was astounded. His mouth opened a little, and he looked at Gatsby and then back at Daisy as if he had just recognized her as someone he knew a long time ago. And then, of course, Daisy she realizes the sort of error that she's made and tries to sort of calm that back. But her compliment to Gatsby, both in what she says and how she says it, reveals a history and a present relationship that is so comfortable and personal that it cannot be platonic. And Tom may be arrogant and Tom may be ignorant, but he can read that message as clearly as if Daisy had said, "Hey, welcome. This is Gatsby. He's my lover." And Tom just nearly loses it, though he's got to kind of keep some semblance of control. But in a way to sort of get some control over the situation, that's why he says, "Okay, we are going to town. That is what we are going to do." He's now establishing that he's the one calling the shots. And so as he's busy trying to go get more alcohol while the women are getting ready, Gatsby and Nick are discussing Daisy's voice and what's just been revealed. And he comments, Gatsby does, "Her voice is full of money." And Nick's like, "Yes, that is it." And it's a voice that represents someone who has always experienced privilege in a way that most people don't. And even though Daisy doesn't always get what she wants, especially because she doesn't have a whole lot of power as a female, her power does lie in her social status, which seems to be embodied and filtered through this just like anything can happen voice. That's what makes it so magical, that there's just indispensable resources and this silver and gold that's melted into the notes of her voice. So they finally all get ready to go, and Gatsby suggests that they take his car, the Rolls Royce. Of course, he can seat 3 people in the front and 3 people in the back, plenty of room for the 5 people in the party. Tom makes a power play here. He says, no, Gatsby, you drive my car, which is a 2-seater blue coupe, and I'm going to be the one to drive your car. So that way the 2 couples would then be in the Rolls Royce, and Gatsby would be isolated all by himself. Daisy, though, is the one who thwarts this plan. She pledges her allegiance to Gatsby by saying that she's going to go with him. So Tom's car is now full with Gatsby and Daisy, and now the Rolls Royce is going to have Tom as the driver, and then Jordan and Nick are going to go along. Now, it may seem odd that the 3 of them pile into the front, but I do want to point out that if they didn't, it would feel like Tom was the chauffeur for Jordan and Nick, and that is not something that's going to be okay. And further, it's going to make a little bit more sense too for what Fitzgerald is setting up with the scene at Wilson's garage, to have them sitting the way that they are. Of course, the 2 men wouldn't sit together. Jordan will be in the middle of them to make it not quite as odd. Also, what seemed to be sort of a throwaway line with Gatsby saying, I think though that the car needs gas, is makes it make sense for then Tom and Nick and Jordan to stop at Wilson's garage to get gas. Otherwise, it wouldn't have made sense for them to stop there because there's too much going on otherwise. So here we are at the gas station where they've, gone ahead because, of course, Tom is feeling pretty stupid and silly about this whole situation. And George Wilson makes only his 2nd appearance so far in the novel since we just met him in chapter 2. He's ill. He apologizes for interrupting their lunch, which then authenticates the fact that the conversation did occur that was heard a few hours earlier. And he says, hey, I need this car so that my wife and I can go west. Tom is incredulous. What? Now his lover is moving away. His wife has a boyfriend. His lover is moving away. This is not a good day for him, folks. Though it's certainly that a follow-up question by George Wilson indicates that there is a power struggle that he's dealing with, because George Wilson then says, she's been talking about it for 10 years, and now she's going whether she wants to or not. I'm going to get her away. Timing is everything. Just as this conversation is happening, Gatsby and Daisy, who have now caught up and are currently passing, then Daisy is waving to them, which of course just reinforces the anger that Tom was already feeling. George then alludes to the fact that he has discovered that his wife was having an affair. He obviously doesn't suspect Tom, but he knows that something is up with his wife. And that's when Nick has this unique opportunity to observe these men. Tom and George have made a parallel discovery about their wives on the same day, and yet Tom looks totally healthy. He's aggressive, whereas George Wilson is someone who looks very ill and is weak. And in the midst of all of this, Nick feels like someone is watching them. And of course, the advertisement with the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg are always looking out over everyone in the Valley of Ashes. But he realizes, no, there really is someone. And in the apartment window, which is above the actual gas station and auto repair shop, it's Myrtle. And Myrtle is looking down with a face that Nick realizes is one of jealousy that is directed at Jordan. Because, of course, Myrtle has never seen Daisy, and because of her proximity to Tom, she believes that this is Tom's wife. And ultimately, the scene concludes with there's just so much pain and anger and tension, and it's all going to get worse. So stay tuned for part 2.